Box office top 10 at 39, The New Boy.
Which I think both you and I like very much. I think it's a really interesting film. I like the it's not even magical realism. I like the fact that I think you summed it up best when you said to Kate Blanchett, we were both very relieved when it turned out not to be the film that we thought it was going to be, because you think it's going to be a film about terrible abuse. And although,
which is what the caption suggests at the beginning.
At the very, very beginning, and then it turns into something altogether more magical than that.
Yes, and I suspect stays with you for longer as a result. Number 11 is Fight Club.
An indication of the way the world has changed. Fight Club was originally released cut.
Is it a U certificate?
It's a U, that's right.
The BBFC
it's a UC. They went, it's fine.
Everybody's wrong.
Just people hitting each other.
I think CBeebies.
That's right. They're doing Fight Club, the animated series.
Very good.
Yeah.
Wonka's at number 10.
I mean, that's its 15th week in the top 10. So, wowzer.
Oppenheimer at 9.
Well, that says week 35. But it must have gone out and come back.
No, I don't think...
Has it been in for 30? Right?
But if this is the top 40 or something like that, then maybe it would have. Maybe it wasn't in the 10. No, but it stayed in the 40.
Anyway, but obviously, since Cillian Murphy won the, did you see there was that news story about balloons in Ireland that say the word Cillian selling out?
Oh, really?
Yeah, because you could.
Excellent. So Oppenheimer's at number 9. The Zone of Interest at number 8, number 23 in the States.
I think it's a really interesting film. You and I think there's not really time to get into this now, but you and I were having a discussion just this morning about something that I was unaware of, that there has been a controversy about the
Jonathan Glazer's speech
that Jonathan Glazer gave. And just to say, if people want to find out more, who would you suggest that they read?
There are two podcasts, just if you do want to know more. There's a very good podcast which David Baddiel and Baroness Warsi are doing, which is called A Muslim and a Jew Go There. And as you would, and it's and they really do, and there's a very, very good discussion, and David Baddiel does set out linguistically and stylistically what he thinks is the problems. Yeah. And Jonathan Friedland does a podcast, which I think I mentioned before, called Unholy, with Yonit Levy of Channel 12 in Tel Aviv. Yeah. And they interview Danny Cohen, former BBC TV executive, who was executive producer on Zone of Interest, who completely disagrees with what Jonathan Glazer said. Anyway, as you say, it's not for us to go into the detail. But if
people want to find out about it.
If you want to find out more, those two conversations are well worth listening to. Monster is at number 7.
Which I thought was great. I met up with a friend of mine who used to live in St Albans and now Duncan Cooper. And Duncan Cooper.
Where is he now?
Well, he's here. He was in Sweden. Then he came over to visit, and we went out and he had a really, really nice time, and we went for a meal. And I said, "What did you do this afternoon?" He said, "Well, I went to see Corriada's Monster, but I was completely jet lagged and tired." And so he said, "I kept falling asleep and waking up." And he said, "And the film didn't make any sense because it's all non-linear." And I said, "It's always like a kind of Rashomon thing." So he's promised he will go back and see it again because I think he'll absolutely love it if he's awake.
Michael Shea says, as ever, Corriada's direction was thoughtful and understated. The structure, a sort of reverse Rashomon. Just explain Rashomon.
So Rashomon is a film in which the same event is seen from a number of different perspectives, all of which give you the idea that the truth is somewhere between all of them.
The structure, a sort of reverse Rashomon, where events are seen from multiple characters' perspectives but becoming clearer and more hopeful over the course of the film, meant that the audience can share in the character's journey. At heart, it's about overcoming fear and discovering what it means to be human. To top it off, there's a great minimalist score by the late Ryuki Sakamoto. Everyone go see it, says Michael.
And of course, the score is interesting because Sakamoto was going to do the whole score, wasn't well enough, ended up doing, I think it's 2 piano pieces, but then Corriada used some pieces from his previous album, and it works perfectly. It's really, I thought it was a lovely film.
Number 6 in the UK is Drive Away Dolls.
The least fun Cohen-related movie since Burn After Reading. It's just rubbish.
Luke says,
here we go.
Hello to the good doctors. Vanguardista, medium-term listener, first-time emailer. I took myself to see Drive Away Dolls on a gloriously grey Monday afternoon in Newcastle, despite the rather sour review from my favourite film critic.
Sour.
And I am glad his words did not put me off. I rather enjoyed this fun and harmless road trip film. It's not perfect, as it did sometimes feel like a parody of a Coen brothers flick, in particular when it featured the two bumbling idiots in pursuit of our female leads. However, through two very likeable and funny lead performances and a sweet love story at its core, I couldn't help but have a smile etched across my face throughout the short running time, which did not feel long enough. Thanks for being the best podcast in the entire world and for helping me through some tough times. P.S. The 2 cans of G&T that I swallowed may or may not have swayed my opinion somewhat. Also, Nick Pocock...
Okay, so I just click, Drive Away Dolls, see it drunk.
That's not exactly what he's saying.
That's kind of what he said.
Nick Pocock in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Dear, I'm not that clever and I can't think of anything. An email from an expat in the home state of the Coen brothers, just a mere 5 miles from their origins in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We're the very cold state, although not this year. Thanks, climate change. We'd get distracted here. At the end of the fine and dedicated Oscars special last week, I heard Mark say he's off to review Drive Away Dolls. Mm-hmm. All I can say is sorry. My wife and I rented this film at home with eager anticipation at the promising trailer. First mistake. Second was watching it. What was the point? Still don't know. It was as though I now knew that the reason it was that the Coen brothers are always the Coen brothers is because one needs to rein in the other when it gets a bit too odd. The psychedelic interludes ultimately involving an odd cameo just had me tilting my head to the side like a wondrous dog. Just didn't get any part. Yeah. No part. Yeah. I suppose the two leads were endearing enough and you liked the opposing characters, but that's where my praise ends. I would have driven away, but we were streaming from home. At least the drive wasn't too long. Good luck to us all, says Nick. Blimey, that sounds as though it's like the end of the world.
That's right.
Good luck, everybody out there.
Good luck, everybody out there. We're relying on you. Well, I'm come back to what I'm now going to use as the tagline: Drive Away Dolls, see it drunk.
2 cans of G&T probably ate most
That's right.
movies, I would think. Number 5 here, number 4 in the States is Imaginary.
Which I haven't seen. They didn't press screen it, but it is now in cinemas. If anyone's seen it, let us know. I will try and go and see it this week, but there's been a ton of stuff to do this week, so we'll review it in the charts next week.
Number 4 in the UK, 7 in the States, Bob Marley, One Love.
One of the big BBFC stories was the fact that One Love is a 12 certificate film, despite an awful lot of marijuana in it, and that is one of the areas in which they have learned from the public that the public are less concerned than they used to be about it. And so I think 12 certificate is exactly right for One Love, and that's probably one of the headlines in the new classification guidelines.
And in passing, for everyone who grew up on Rowan Atkinson live in Belfast, whenever I see the word marijuana, I always hear him saying marijuana. If you haven't heard that makes absolutely no sense. Migration.
You say Mary Jane, don't you? That's usually your.
Eh?
There was whoever it was did a joke about how can you tell how can you spot a plainclothes policeman at a festival? They're the one wearing plain clothes and saying, "Hey man, where can a cat cut a reefer around here?"
Is that okay? That's good. I didn't know that. Migration is at number 3.
I'm still so impressed by the email we had a couple of weeks ago from the very responsible parent who took their child to see it. The child found it scary, said, "I want to leave." The parent said, "Fine," and they left. And then wrote a thing saying, "We think the film was good because the scary bit was scary."
Wicked Little Letters is still number 2.
Somebody quite famous, I forget who it was now, said on that social media Instagram thing, I thought it was just me, I think it was something from Radio 4, I thought it was just me being stupid and childish, finding swearing funny, but it turns out Kermode is exactly the same. Sorry, it is funny. Swearing, it is big and it is clever.
Depending on who's saying it and how they're saying it.
Exactly.
And number 1 is Dune Part 2.
Dunk Part 2.
Dunk Part 2. Jeremy and Luton, Simon and Mark, we took the family to see Wonka around Christmas and we all loved it. Naturally, the kids have since noticed the presence of Timothée Chalamet on billboards for Dune Part 2.
Yes.
Prompting cries of, "Look, it's the Wonka guy. Can we go and watch Dune?"
He is number 1 and number 10.
I impressed upon them that Dune has no cane-twirling dance routines and songs about chocolate.
It has got big worms.
It has freaky space nuns, ambiguous bagpipes, and lots of sand. Nevertheless, they persisted, and last week we watched Dune Part 1. So this which is on Netflix at the moment. So that's an easy
right,
an easy hit. To my surprise, says Jeremy and Luton, they loved it. I was, of course, delighted that they got on board with one of my favourite sci-fi films of recent years.
Very good.
But it does create a conundrum. Now they want to see part 2 at the cinema. I hear it's darker and the whole experience would be more intense on the big screen, which is certainly true of any film. Really.
Yes.
Any advice on whether or not to see Dune Part 2?
How old are the kids?
Would it be suitable for a 10 and a 12-year-old with a new appetite for more grown-up movies? Or to put it another way, what is the key difference here between the 12 rating that Part 1 received and 12A for Part 2?
There is no difference. So 12A exists in cinemas. 12 exists on video. For reasons of the Video Recordings Act, the 12A certificate didn't transfer, but there is no difference at all. And the way the 12 certificate, when it became 12A, the BBFC had originally said they wanted to have a lower age limit of 8, but it was just too complicated to do. So their ruling is it's for 12 and above, unless you think that your child is up to it. Yeah. But below the age of 8, we very, very strongly advise not. So 10 and 12, so one of them is 12. The one that's 10, it's a matter of whether or not you think your 10-year-old is up to dealing with stuff it is dark.
Is it darker than the first one, in your opinion?
It is, but I would also say that I think it's darker if you're a grown-up. Because I think if you're just watching the film from a perspective in which perhaps all the stuff about the religious wars and the bigotry and all that stuff, maybe you're not getting the full depth of it. So that sounds terribly patronising because people, 12-year-olds would read science fiction and get all that stuff. The really dark stuff involves you understanding what's going on. It would be possible to watch the movie and go, wow, big worms. Fighty, scary sequence. I mean, actually, the gladiatorial match is, I think that's pretty full on, isn't it? That's quite a full on thing. So I can't advise you for your particular 10-year-old, but my feeling is that a lot of the darkness is to do with the subtext rather than splatter or gore or anything like that. What do you think?
In an ideal world, I mean, you're right. First of all, we can't possibly say. I mean, you can look at the BBFC and see what they say. The 10-year-old is there may well be some 15-year-olds who find it too much. Everything is entirely down to you.
Well, the good lady Professor Her indoors saw it in IMAX and found it completely overwhelming, right. like almost too much.
So I know parenting doesn't work like this, but if you can see it first and then treat yourself and go a second time. With your 10 and 12, ideally see it first, but because there are some scenes where the Fremen obviously exist on liquid, which sometimes comes from people.
Oh yes, of course there is that. So yes,
and there is a scene where you see that it's kind of in the background, but there is kind of fluid being drained from people, and you go, oh my,
people,
dead people indeed. Certainly, they certainly are.
They are by the time they're finished.
It is a tricky one because the whole point about 12s is that we're on the cusp here, and there'll be some 10-year-olds who will find it very upsetting, and some 10-year-olds who breeze their way through.
If you are feeling at all uncertain about it, I would avoid taking the 10-year-old to see the biggest IMAX projection, because the thing is, it is really, really big, really, really big. So maybe if you want to kind of just quieten that experience down a little bit. I mean, it's one thing watching a film at home on Netflix. It's a different thing being in the middle of the IMAX 70mm presentation in which it's filling your vision completely.
Anyway, so that is number one.